Alright, you read the title correctly? Opening systems are killing your chess. So this is a video I've been meaning to make for a while now, because I've seen it from a lot of students I've coached, players I've just observed over the years, where opening systems are having this sort of net negative effect on their overall development as a chess player. For example, we've all seen the London system before. Maybe you're a London system player yourself, and you might be thinking, Sam, don't attack my London system, right? Like what's wrong with this? But the problem is that when you play the London system, you're only getting a sort of view, let's say, of a very small kind of dimension of the game of chess. You're playing the exact same structure every game, you're putting your pieces in the exact same places, more or less, probably, and that can actually be a good thing in some sense, because it means the learning curve is going to be a lot less steep compared to other mainline openings, such as the Queen's Gambit, where, for example, you're going to have to deal with like the structures of Rise from the Slav, the Queen's Gambit Declined, where maybe you can encounter something like a Carlsbad structure. You're also going to have to deal with, say, openings like the Indian defenses, like the King's Indian, right? Where now you get this structure where you might get a close center where black plays e5 at some point, you go d5. So I really do understand why many players would say, like, screw that, right? Like, I'm just going to play the London system, do the same thing every game, and haha, I'm not going to have to deal with all of your bullshit, right? And I'll be perfectly honest, I think by adopting such an approach, at first your results may indeed be better just because there's less to learn, it's easier to pick up in a short amount of time, which is why so many players gravitate towards these opening systems. But in the long term, like, assuming you're not like a casual player, you care about improving your results as much as possible, right? This kind of approach is probably not going to be best for your overall growth as a chess player. Because when you're going into the exact same structure in 50% of your games, all of your white games, let's say, you're severely limiting, again, sort of your exposure to the various sort of structures and positions that you can sort of get in chess. You're just like, nope, I'm just going to stay in my comfort zone. I'm going to do the exact same thing every game. That other stuff, that's way too scary. That is going to really hinder your growth as a chess player. The other sort of problem that I have with system openings I want to address is the sort of system mindset, where it's not even necessarily per se that there's anything like inherently wrong with the London system, because at the end of the day, these are just sort of natural moves on the chessboard, which we have then as humans associated, you know, names to, ideas to, and that might kind of sound like, Sam, this is all like weird, whatever you're saying right now, like cut to the chase, right? But basically what I want to say is that there's nothing inherently about the moves that white has picked so far that says we have to play these moves e3, c3, knight bd2, knight f3, bishop d3, which a lot of players when they play the London system is sort of what they do every single game. Maybe if you're a London system player, you might not be in that category, maybe you vary what you do every game, but for a large percentage, this is exactly what they do. But the thing you have to understand, and I'm going to show a game of my students I saw somewhat recently where it might have continued something like knight f6, e3 let's say, something like e6 I think, knight f3, knight c6 happened, and what he did in this position was he played c3. And this kind of fits in with the whole concept of the London system, right, where you put your pawns on d4, c3, e3, and then you develop your pieces from there. But you have to really ask yourself, like, why are we playing the move c3 in the first place? And very often if you actually dig into it, you will find that in many of the variations, the reason you're playing the move c3 is because black is actually playing this move c5, they're attacking the d4 pawn, and to defend it, you're going to play c3. Because if you go c4, for example, as you very often do in sort of many Queen's Gambit structures, now black is going to take on d4, and they're probably going to give you a not so desirable version of like an isolated queen's pawn eventually, where you don't really want your bishop on f4 in these sort of structures. But a lot of players don't really go to the depth of trying to understand why they're playing certain moves. They're just like, oh, this is a London system, I put my pawn on c3. But then they don't have that sort of base understanding that very often in queen's pawn structures, it is a mistake to put your knight in front of, say, your c pawn like this. And the way to punish that would be to actually play c4, transpose to more of a Queen's Gambit type position, and really punish black for their poor opening play by playing a move such as knight c6. Another very common example is where, like, say your opponent just plays complete and utter garbage, like they just play a6 or something, right? Like, are you really telling me you're going to play bishop f4 and like e3 and just go for the London system? Like, if this is what you would actually do if your opponent played a6, you're a complete nutcase. But this is what so many London system players do. They try to play the same exact thing every single game, no matter what their opponent does. And they don't have this proper, like, in my opinion, what is required for any chess player if they want to become strong, which is to have this principled mindset towards the game of trying to punish mistakes from their opponent. Like bishop f4 is not punishing your opponent's last move, you need to play e4 and grab the whole center. That is of course why, again, like in this position, after d4, black's two main moves in the position are to play knight f6 and d5. Some other examples I want to show though regarding the London system, like let's say for example we have a sort of King's Indian setup that black goes for in this position. And after the following moves, we get this. And again, I think what white should probably go for in such a position is to start pushing the c pawn forward, not to c3, but actually to c4, go knight c3. And say what a lot of players might do in this position is that they go like, okay, in the London, I put my bishop on d3. But they're not really understanding how the position has changed, in that now for pawn on g6, the bishop is a lot less active on this diagonal in general, so actually what you want to do is put your bishop on e2 instead. Not to mention that because black has played this move d6, very often that implies later on they're going to go e5, and with the bishop on f4, that means whenever e5 comes, assuming we can't just win it, like in this position, of course, e5 we can just win a pawn, right? But in the future, let's say if they go rook e8, we just ignore their moves, they're going to go e5, and now this could actually be really problematic, because if we just like take and go bishop g3, now they play e4, and oh no, we're losing a piece, and this was enabled by the fact we carelessly developed our bishop to the d3 square, instead of, again, the e2 one. But switching colors briefly, I don't just want to spend the whole video trashing the London, I feel like I've already sort of done that enough. I want to talk about the King's Indian defense, which is another opening which sort of gets treated like a system opening very often, where players try to go for the exact same sort of plan every single damn game, where they might see some, you know, famous masterpiece from a player such as like Kasparov, where like he absolutely nuked white in the king side by going for one of these plans where you put a knight in d7, go f5, f4, g5, and so then what happens many times with these sorts of King's Indian players is they get very attached to this one sort of way of playing the opening. They're like, oh, okay, I want to play like e5, castles, knight c6, bring my knight back to e7, shove my knight out of the way, play f5, and hack them on the king side. Let's go, this is like a forced win, right? But they don't really understand the nuances of the opening. They don't understand how they need to adjust their plan accordingly to the moves their opponent plays. For example, let's say the opponent plays bishop e3, a very common mistake, and I actually made an entire video on this a couple months ago. I think it was titled something along the lines of 95% of players don't understand this, or maybe it was 99% even, and that's pretty accurate because a lot of King's Indian players, especially in the Lichess database, it shows that knight c6 is the most popular move. This is in fact a big mistake after d5, knight e7, when the white king has not yet committed to castling kingside, it's still in the center, which means after knight d2, now stopping knight g4, say we follow a similar couple moves, let's say knight d7, b4, f5, f3. If you go for f4 now, and you try to go for g5, white goes c5, and you might not believe the database stats at first, but white basically scores around like 75% from this position, and the entire reason is that white's queenside attack is really going places, black's kingside attack is going nowhere, the king is in the center, you're essentially attacking a non-existent target, which is why, coming back to this position, right, you can't just treat this as like, okay, I do the same thing against every single opening, you have to adjust your game plan just a little bit according to what your opponent does, right? Maybe you play e takes d4, this is a very common theoretical move, maybe you play knight g4, which is, I would argue, maybe the most principled move, trying to exploit the drawback of the last move of white's, which was putting the bishop on e3, which can be a target for the knight, right? And then we can get some positions like bishop g5, f6, and white can go bishop h4, or right back to c1. Actually, I think that's something that's becoming more popular recently, but that's a bit off topic. But coming full circle, right, again, the two main drawbacks I believe with system openings is one, you're playing the same damn structure every time, and two is a sort of mindset you sort of adopt when you play these openings. Oh, I'm a London system player, I put my pieces on these squares every single game, and I just want to reiterate, right, there's nothing inherently wrong with the London opening. There's something wrong with the London system, not maybe in an objective sense, but in a practical sense, where you are not actually trying to properly adjust your strategy to the position. You're just trying to enforce whatever you want to do regardless of what your opponent does. This is a diverse opening. You can play it in multiple ways. For example, one approach which I probably should have mentioned, but I mention it now, is like against g6 subs, for example. Sometimes you can play a knight to c3. And if black just develops normal, you can play e4, and now you're in a Pruitt's defense actually, which is usually a pretty good opening for white. So very often black will play d5, but now you can go for this sort of very aggressive setup where you put a pawn on h4, and you go for a very non-standard kingside attack, which is very dangerous for the black pieces to really face. But by going for the exact same sub every single game with like E3, C3, you're robbing yourself of these sort of opportunities to really experience the richness of the game that chess is. But on that note, I think that's a good place to end off the video. If you guys enjoyed it, please leave a like. Subscribe, of course, more content like this, and also check out my other stuff in the description below. I have a free newsletter where I talk about sort of chess improvement related topics, and also coaching if you want to sign up for that, if you want to take your game to the next level. With that being said, hope you guys have a good day. I will see you until next time.